Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sew the fly front zipper now. So it has 4 different pieces. The pants front, which you'll cut 2 of. So you'll have a left and right side. So, and these have a right and wrong side as well. We also have the fly facing, which you'll cut 1 of. And you'll notice I interfaced or fused the wrong side of that. And then we have our fly shield, which you also cut 1 of, which has also been interfaced. And you'll need a zipper. Okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to take our pants and we're going to go ahead and sew the facing to the pants to start with. And we'll also prep our shield as well. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Alright, so we're at the sewing machine. First thing we're going to do is take our pants and put right sides together. Right, and here's my crotch right here. And you notice I have a little notch, or I have a notch. Okay, this notch is where the zipper will stop and the crotch seam will begin. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin right there to start with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from that notch and I'm going to stitch down the crotch, okay? But I'm not going to stitch all the way to the end, all right? I'm going to stop about an inch or an inch and a half away from the end because we want to leave this open down here so that we'll be able to sew our inseams later on, okay? So again, this is the point where my zipper stops. That's where I'm going to start stitching. I have 1/2 inch seam allowance, so let's roll. Start. There we go. Take that pin out. And I'm just going to stitch for about just a few inches, just so I have an inch to inch and a half open at the end. Here we go. Back tack beginning and end. That's good right there. All right. So there it is, stitched. Let's go ahead and trim that back. All right, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to install my facing. All right, so this is my facing, and this goes against one side of your pant front. And you're going to put right sides together like so, and that's going to sew all the way down to where you started your stitching, okay, basically where the zipper will end. All right, so let's go ahead, and again I put right sides together here. Let's see a little better. Okay, so there's the front of my pant opening. This is where my closure, my fly front will end up being. Okay, and here is my fly facing. I'm going to take the cut edge of this and I'm going to line that right up with my pants front like so. And I'm going to stitch this on at 1/2 inch. So let's flip this around so I can see. And let's go ahead and stitch this on. Back tack beginning and end. If you need to, you can pin the two together to make it easier for you. And again, I'm going to stop stitching right where my stitching started. Be careful not to get this side of the pant caught in there or anything. And back tack. There we go. Let's cut that away. All right. Now, let's go ahead and open this back up. And what we're going to do is we're going to understitch right here. Okay, so this is my facing. Here's the seam allowance. This is the seam allowance of my facing and the seam allowance of my pant. I want them both pressed towards my facing when it's opened. Okay, so right now my facing is opened and both seam allowances of the facing and the pant are underneath here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch on the facing side, I'm going to stitch very close to the seam, all right? And I'm going to stitch through all layers, the facing and those two seam allowances. What that does is it catches those seam allowances to this facing, and when I fold this under, once it's done, it takes back about 1/16 of an inch of this pant fabric with it, the front pant fabric, and it gives it a nice clean finish. Okay, so let's go ahead and again understitch that. So again, both my seam allowances, my facing and my pant, are pressed out, are facing out. My facing is laying right on top of them, and I'm going to go ahead and come in here. I'm going to stitch on the facing side very close to that seam, like 1/16 of an inch or so away. And you can back tack at beginning and end of this, and make sure when you're doing this that you're pulling the facing in the opposite direction of the pant, so that you get a nice clean seam. You don't need bubbles or folds or anything. There we go. All right, so there's that. And you can see the back side. There's my understitching. It's the white stitching right there. Okay. So now this, I'll press it back, but you can see if I just fold it under right now even, it brings back about 1/16 of an inch or so of the pant fabric and gives it a nice clean finish. Okay, so let's put this aside for a second, and we're going to take our shield. Okay, here's my right side, my wrong side I've interfaced. So what I'm going to do first is I need to finish this edge. There's a couple ways you can do this. If you wanted, you could just fold right sides or wrong sides together and then overlock this. Okay, I'm going to actually put wrong sides together like so, and I'm going to stitch this at 1/4 of an inch. So make sure our cut edges come in. Okay, so I put wrong sides together. Sorry, I put right sides together. All right, so I folded right sides together, and I'm just going to stitch this at 1/4 of an inch, this curve here, to give it a clean finish. And I'll back tack at the beginning and end. There we go. And just to reduce bulk a little bit, I may trim this back to about 1/8. And right here at the corner, I'm actually going to reduce it a little bit more, like so. All right. And now I can go to the iron, and I'm going to fold this right side out, like so. You can use your point turner if you need to. Work carefully with your scissors and push that point out. And we're going to press it flat, just like that. Okay, so let's go back to the ironing board, and we'll take our pant front that we started to. Okay, so here we are. We're going to press our facing, or our shield rather. We're going to press that flat, and we'll press a crease in it as well. Okay, and there's our shield. All right. Okay, so let's take our pant front, and let's fold everything out of the way so it's just our facing is pretty much exposed, the only thing exposed. We're going to take our zipper, and we're going to put it right side of the zipper against our facing like this. All right, so there's a couple things you need to know to line this up. All right, so here is our zipper stop. We want that to stop about 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom of the facing. Okay, so if I just take my ruler, and since this is just a sample, I'll mark it right on there. I'm going to measure up. Here's the bottom of my facing. I'm going to measure up there, from there, about 3/4 of an inch. and I'll just mark a line for reference. Okay, you can put a pin in there, you can mark it with chalk, whatever you need to. All right, so I want my zipper stop to go right on that line pretty much. The other thing I'm lining up now is the edge of the zipper tape. I'm going to line up right with my seam, okay? I don't want it overlapping my seam. I want it pretty much right against my seam so that there's barely like a 32nd to a 16th of an inch of the facing showing, okay? So again, you're going to put zipper teeth down against the facing. You're going to line up the zipper stop, the bottom of the zipper stop, right with the top of that line. That's 3/4 of an inch above the bottom of the facing edge. And then we're going to line up this side of our zipper tape right with this seam, okay, about a 1/16 of an inch away from it or so. All right. Once you have that, we can go ahead and pin this in place. Make sure everything is lining up correctly. Yes, it is. So I'm just going to put a pin through all my layers here just to hold it in place first. Like so. There we go. And there we are. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to stitch the zipper on to the facing. What we do is we're going to stitch on this side of the zipper, the zipper tape that's furthest away from the seam of the facing. Okay, so we'll stitch right down the center of this. So let's go back to our machine and do that. Okay, here we are at the machine. We're going to stitch this on. First thing I want to do is change my presser foot. I'm going to change it to a zipper foot. It will make it much easier to sew this on. So let me just remove that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch right down the center of the zipper tape, okay? Catching it to the facing. If it makes it easier, you could base this on by hand. I just pinned it, it should be fine. Here we go. Back tack at the beginning and end. And don't sew over your pins. Okay, there we go. Alright, so my zipper has now been sewn on to the facing. Let's go to the ironing board now and press this all back. Okay, so we're going to press this back now. So I'm just going to fold this back like so. And I'm going to give that a quick press. If you understitched it correctly, it should fold back very easily. Nicely. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch our facing, okay, to the front of the pant. And we're basically going to top stitch through the front of the pant to do that. We do this because if we didn't, this would just be kind of flopping around inside your pant. We don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put some pins in, just holding that facing down so it doesn't move on me. Okay. There we go. Alright, so typically what you would do now is you would mark your stitching line on the front of the pant and you would just top stitch through it. I have found that actually what you can do is stitch from this side, and if you're very careful, you can just stitch right down about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and that will look very nice and clean on here if you do it correctly. Okay, so let's go back to the machine and we'll stitch this down. We're back. we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch this on, and we're going to do it at about 1/4 of an inch or so away from the edge of the facing. Okay, so let's go ahead and change our zipper foot real quick. There we go. And so again, about 1/4 of an inch from this edge, I'm going to stitch that down through all layers. Let's go ahead and do that. Back tack beginning and end. All right. Now, one thing you want to do is not sew over. So here's the side of the zipper tape you've already stitched down. This side you do not want to stitch over. This side that has not been stitched down yet. So make sure you lift that up when you come around this curve. And back tack at the end. There we go. All right, so there it is. And again, we did not stitch over this side of the zipper tape that hasn't been stitched down yet. And there's the front of it. Okay. All right, so now we need to stitch this side of the zipper tape to the other side of our pant. Okay, so what we're going to do is leave our zipper zipped up like it is and bring this together. And what we're going to do is we're going to line up this edge. We're going to line up the front of our pant edge here with the edge of the zipper tape. Okay, so we want to make sure we don't shift this up or anything. We want it to lay nice and straight. And we're going to bring it right over. And again, I like to just kind of pull it and make sure it's nice and straight. And I'll line up those two edges, starting at the bottom here, and I'm going to pin them together. Okay, so I'm moving everything out of the way. I just have that zipper tape and the front side of the pant that has nothing stitched to it yet. There we go. And there we are. Okay. So now we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to stitch this at 1/4 of an inch. All right. Don't get confused because the pattern has a 1/2 inch seam allowance there. We only want to do 1/4 of an inch there. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So here we're at the machine. I'm going to stitch this on at 1/4 of an inch. I'm actually going to go switch back to my zipper foot just because I don't want my the edge of my presser foot knocking against the teeth and knocking it off course when I stitch. Okay, we're going to stitch this on at 1/4 of an inch. Here we go. Back tack beginning and end. There we go. Back tack there. There it is, stitched on. Okay, let's go back to this table. Now, whoops, we're starting to get our fly front. It's pretty much done. There it is. Okay. Close it. We have a couple more steps left to do and we'll be done. Let's turn it back over. We need to put our shield on. The side that we just sewed our zipper tape onto, we're going to add the shield there. Okay. And we'll stitch this on just catching, again, that seam allowance and the zipper tape that we just sewed on. That's all we want. Okay. So move everything out of the way. Take your shield, which is going to go across the back of the zipper. Okay, so like this. And we're going to stitch that right down to the end here of where our zipper stops. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll do that at a 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so I'm lining these up at the top. The waist of this matches with the waist of the pant. You can pin it through all layers if it helps. And again, I'm just going to stitch this on at 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to catch that zipper tape and the seam allowance that I just caught when I sewed the zipper to it. Make sure everything else is pressed out of the way. And then this should hang over about an inch, or sorry, about 3/4 of an inch or so, give or take. There we go. There it is. All right, let's go back. All right, so this is how we're looking so far. It's looking good. Just have a couple more steps. So there's the shield. You can see it's covering the tape and that facing. And I can go ahead and open up my zipper, and there's the shield behind it. Okay. A couple more things we're going to do is we don't need all this extra zipper. So what we're going to do is open this up, and we're going to stitch right across here a couple times, and that way we can cut off the rest and the zipper head won't come off, or zipper pull. Same thing here, we'll stitch across here. And we'll just do it at our seam allowance. So if I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, so we'll stitch here at a 1/2 inch and we'll clip off the rest. And then we also need to add a bar tack right here at the bottom. Okay, that keeps this from lifting away, because you can see this is where the zipper head stops and it's still open a little bit. So just to keep that closed, we'll just add a little bar tack right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So first thing I'll do is add the bar tack. And I'm going to do it right here at the bottom. Now it's kind of like a buttonhole stitch. It's a zigzag that's very close together. I'm just going to do a back stitch back and forth a couple times. There we go. The bar tack does look cleaner, but this will do the job for now. Okay, and so that holds that closed there. Now let's go ahead and we're going to just stay stitch across the top of this. This is the side with my shield, and I'll just do it at my seam allowance. I'm going to go right across the zipper. I'll back tack it, and just because I'm a little bit paranoid, I'm going to go up a 1/4 of an inch and do it again. Do not want that zipper head coming off after all this hard work. I can just cut those threads, and I can cut the top of the zipper off now, or this extra length of zipper. And I'll do it on this side too. Okay, this is the side with the facing. Again, I'll do it at a 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to go a 1/4 of that and do that. Eventually a waistband or facing or something will go on here, most likely a waistband, and you won't even see any of that. But until that happens, it will make it so you don't lose your zipper head or pull, and you won't have to have all this extra zipper tape hanging off. Okay, so let's go back to the table. Okay, so now there it is complete. Your fly front zipper. There's our fly. Okay, here's our facing here. Zipper, pull that open. You can see the shield. There's the facing and everything. Flip it over. Again, there's our shield, zipper, and our facing. Okay. So that's it. The fly front zipper. Complete.